Hi everyone, welcome. My name is Maitre. I'm very passionate about tabletops and I'm learning to be a better GM, a better player, and a better person. And I will share with you some of the cool stuff that I've been learning. Today we're going to talk about Session Zero, what it is, why you should have it, how to run it, and what you need to cover. So, first thing, you might not need to do a session zero. It's a one shot, especially. But if you're doing any kind of longer form play, 3 to 5 sessions or more than that, or campaign especially, it's a pretty good idea to do even with the session zero. It's good to have a few quick caveats or like a summary of what you would cover doing a full session zero, just like the first 10-15 minutes of the game. That kind of thing, just to sort of set expectations. So, session zeros are basically a pre game meeting between the GM and the players, and you basically cover expectations and logistics of the game. I have started to do a mid game check in as well, which I call session 0.5, but I will talk about that in a different video. Anyway, session 0 should happen before any long form or campaign play even starts. The purpose of session zero is to sort of establish expectations and desires from all parties involved, the GM and the players. You can discuss what safety tools are in effect, discuss rules, maybe create characters and character links, more or less sort of set the tone for the upcoming game. So let's dive into the specifics you're going to cover. Maybe you'll do all of them, but you definitely don't have to. Number one, safety tools. If you've all played together for ages, maybe you can just kind of breeze over this one because everybody knows everybody else's dynamic. But definitely at least touch on it. Just a quick, like, hey, is there anything anyone wants to call out? This becomes especially important if the group kind of broadly knows each other, but there's maybe one or two new players. Everyone knows each other, and everyone knows Jason has like a thing about spiders, or like Tom has a hardline about torture, but these new players maybe don't. So you should, as the GM, kind of bring it up, even if you think it might be moot for most people. If, on the other hand, you haven't played with these people at all before, or have only interacted with them in a limited capacity, or played with them in a limited capacity, this becomes really important. There's basically two ways that I've seen this done. What works for you should be something you decide for yourself. First, ahead of session zero, you should have agreed on what tools you're going to be using. I like the MCDM checklist. I link that in the description box for you guys to check out, along with my videos on safety tools that cover the other tools that you can use. After you've shared the checklist or whatever form or whatever you're using, you go through everyone's form and safety individually, and you can ask clarifying questions either at session zero or ahead of time in DMs, though always with the option of the person either talking about it privately or not at all. The other way for people to do it, for you to do it as a GM with people you don't really know super well, is to create a single game safety sheet that kind of consolidates everybody's input and kind of reflects everything as a whole. Regardless of what option you move forward with, whether it's people you've known and you're just gonna touch on it, or you're a little bit more granular in your approach, Either way, what you discuss in your session 0, that stuff is the floor. It is not the ceiling. Really just makes GM and player comfort a shared responsibility and a shared experience rather than just the GMs. Again, I'm not going to tell you what safety tools to use. That really comes down to you and your table. You just need to know how to be aware of your players, and they need to know how to be aware of you. This is not a replacement for social awareness. Safety tools just kind of facilitate conversations around general security and comfort, which are the things that sort of need to be paramount. Me personally, I use X cards, lines and veils, and an open door policy. I also tell my players exactly that in those words, that this is a floor, not a ceiling. If we need to make amendments or additions organically through play, if things are discovered, it's really no problem, because kind of stuff's gonna happen. Like it's going to happen. The thing is, as much intention and focus as you put around this, they're honestly super rarely used. But people should know that their comfort and sense of security is paramount. Somewhat paradoxically, if people feel they have control over the situation, they're willing to let go of the reins more. So the more time you spend sort of figuring out people's comfort levels, the more comfortable they are going to feel with you, because they know that you are prioritizing what's important to them. Ultimately, the point of safety tools is not to censor anything, but to facilitate play around, really dark and emotional narratives, violent descriptions, whatever is fun for you. Like, I really enjoy really visceral combat descriptions, and I like romantic themes in games, but all of that stuff requires very intentional play on my part as the GM. So I kind of make sure to talk through those things with my players. Number 2, introduce characters and PC links. Here's where you hear from players about who's playing what. Players can discuss character concepts, if they haven't already picked races, classes, abilities, backgrounds, like that kind of thing. This is a good place to do that, especially if you run the kind of game where mechanical balance is important, or if it is the kind of game where you kind of need a good spread of skills across, like I would say Call of Cthulhu, Fragged Empire, like all of those things. Party balance isn't so important with the GM, but as the way the game itself is designed, it's better if you have people in the party that have a spread of certain skills. So sessions, there's a great place for that, just to kind of figure out, like, okay, who has what. This is also where you see if the characters people have in mind and the party that they form as a whole kind of fit the tone and theme of your game. If you're running a fairly serious sci-fi game that's going to explore like themes of sentience and humanity, and someone says they want to play a space werewolf named Like and Subscribe, now is maybe the time to suggest that maybe that's a better fit for a different game. Maybe a future game. On the other hand, if there is a player that is kind of struggling with finding a character concept, like, I don't know what to play, this is a great time for the group to collaborate and churn out ideas, maybe even see what's needed mechanically, as I said. If it's that kind of game, with the GM sort of providing direction on what would work well within the narrative within the game. If you have decided as a party, as the GM, that people sort of already know each other or know of each other before the game, here's where you go through those specific. Who are your characters to each other? You absolutely do not need to have pre-existing links. You know, you can meet in a tavern. That's a classic for a reason. But if you decide that you do know them ahead of time, figure that out here. Not everyone has to have links to everyone else. For example, in one of the games that I'm in right now, I'm the sister of one of the PCs who knows the rogue character, but I don't know the rogue directly. On the other hand, I know one of the other PCs from our work together in like the salt mines, but my brother character doesn't have a direct link to this character. So not everybody needs to be linked to everybody else. Certainly they can be, but they don't have to be. Number 3, themes and tones. We kind of touched on this a little bit in character intros, but here's where the GM should outline any themes they want to cover if you have already identified them. For me in my home game, the major themes are religion versus spirituality, the role of governing bodies and legislative institutions in the society, and personal ethics. These are themes in my specific homebrew story that I'm planning on playing through. I don't feel like I can run an effective game without those themes being touched on. So this session 0 is the chance for a player to say to you, I don't think I would enjoy playing through one or several of the themes you have in mind. If you're playing more of an open world game and you are the kind of GM that sort of builds the story around what the players want, this is where you ask them, what do you want to explore for your characters specifically? What themes should there be in the game? And one of the games I'm in, one of the characters wants to explore a story with his long lost father. Another wants to explore the concept of goodness and fairness because they're kind of growing in sentience themselves. And it's totally okay for a player to not know right now. I generally have the bones of a character ready at session 0, but I need to play them for a session or two before I really sort of understand them within the context of the game and the world. And then I can tell the GM sort of like if they have asked me what I want to explore and that kind of thing. It's also okay for a player to say they don't really have anything specific and they just want to play. If something comes up, it comes up, but they don't have anything at the outset that they don't have a finish line they're hoping to reach at this stage. And that's totally fine too. Point is to ask. It doesn't have to be either or the GM's themes or the player's themes. The best games I've played in have both. It's something that I aspire to in my home game. Regardless of themes, though, what you absolutely need to discuss is tone. Is this going to be more of a serious game? Is it going to be more goofy? Is it more beer and pretzels? Is it more of a narrative that you're hoping for folks to be kind of intentional about? Again, it doesn't have to be either or. Most games have some levity just kind of baked in because you're all friends around the table, essentially, even though you're playing more of a serious game. Like, I would absolutely call some of the bigger actual plays, even the ones the streams that I'm on, like, I would say those are mostly serious games, but because you are kind of playing with people you like being around, like that sort of friendship and levity naturally and organically comes to the surface, but the tone of the game remains serious. Like, serious doesn't mean dull. I don't know how better to explain it. I think people probably understand what I'm saying though, so I'm not gonna harp on it. but essentially, themes and tones. This part of session 0 is for the players and the GMs to talk about what kind of campaign they want to play. Or conversely, what they have no interest in experiencing. That's the other part of it, is that what do you just, are there any things you just don't want to do? Number 4, house rules. You might decide through play to house rule something. If you have something you've already decided on, you should share it. Preferably in writing so that everyone can refer to it as needed and there is a lot of clarity around it. Of course, this doesn't remove the need to bring it up in play because people forget, but it's about setting expectations so players kind of know what they're getting into. For people who aren't familiar with house rules, they are changes that you make to rules as written for one reason or another. I have a few for my home game that I use. I'll make a separate video of them, and they're D&D 5e house rules. Number 5, scheduling and logistics. This is where you discuss the actual operation of the game. How often do you play? Where do you meet? How long are sessions? Rules for attendance. For example, we'll meet at 7:30 p.m. Eastern till 10:30 p.m. Eastern every Wednesday. We have four players and 1 GM regularly, but our rule for attendance is that if we have a quorum of 3 players and 1 GM, we will typically play. Of course, this is not like a blood bond or anything, but this kind of general agreement ahead of time and even this kind of quorum rule kind of just takes the pressure off of, like, holy fuck, if I don't show up, there's no game for like 4 other people. It's just an easy way to kind of set expectations and remind folks. Expectations that you can have of me and I will have of you. That is the GM and the players. This is kind of optional. I like to do it to sort of level set on what kind of dynamic we should expect. Basically, what I say is we should respect each other and give each other the space to have fun. If I step in as a player and ask a player something, I will ask that other players don't interrupt. This shouldn't happen regularly, but it does happen once in a while. It might happen once in a while. I also share that I will make my best effort to make the game compelling, but I expect players to find their own motivation and reasons to engage with the story and the game and the world. If you decide that your character is totally risk averse and chooses to avoid and sit out major events in the name of caution, that's going to limit your play experience. And while it is a totally valid character choice, I'm sure there are GMs that can make it really fun and interesting for that player. That's not who I am. That's not me. If you're going to play in my game, I will ask what you are doing, because I'm probably not going to have like other side stuff for you to do. folks should know that ahead of time, like playing a super extra cautious, risk averse character in my games will limit your gameplay options. If you want to play that kind of character, I'm not going to be able to run the kind of game for you that I really want to. And frankly, on a personal level, I'll probably resent you a little bit as a person, because I'll be really disappointed in the fact that I'm not able to get you to play in a way that feels meaningful. Yeah, even if it feels meaningful for you, it's just, I'm not saying it's logical. I'm just saying that's what it is. The whole thing is crappy and sort of flies in the face of the thing that I find to be the paramount thing, which is that the relationships with people at the table is the thing that's important. Like, that's why you're doing all of this. It's not to be an S tier GM or whatever. It's to be an S tier person. Like, that's the point. Is you want people to feel good about the games that they've chosen to take between 2 and 4 hours minimum out of their lives and their weeks to give to you and to play with you. I also share in the space that I'll occasionally drop narrative beats. Like, your character thinks something about something. You are, and I will tell my players, like, you are free to run with those suggestions because that's all they are. They are just suggestions. Or you can contradict them and say, no, I don't think my PC would respond that way. I think they would actually do X instead. And that's awesome, because all I'm trying to get at in that moment is having that PC engage with that piece of the story specifically. How you engage is totally up to you. This was just an idea that I had. Finally, I used this section to ask any clarifying questions that may have arisen through the past few items. Like if a player says, for example, he wanted to explore that relationship with his long lost dad, I will ask, like, okay, is it okay if it's something negative, like, they're a traitor to the state or like a drug addict or something like that? Or do you want it to be positive, where you're like a hero that rescues them and they themselves are kind of heroic and they left you because they didn't have a choice but to leave you to do this heroic thing? Like, does it matter what the tenor of that is? If it doesn't, and I can decide, then I'll decide something plot appropriate. But if you have an expectation, please share that with me, because I would hate for you to imagine your long lost father narratively as this heroic character, and I'm like, oh yeah, actually is this like deadbeat drug addict, and sorry. They're just very, very different. And I wouldn't want to do that to somebody. So if you have a thought, now is, or whenever, but if you have a thought now, share that with me now. If you have it later, share it with me later. Point is for your players to know that that door is open. And finally, number 7, which sort of feeds on to this, miscellaneous. This is for anyone to bring up anything that you haven't specifically covered that you want to, maybe Tabitha is traveling for work for 2 weeks and won't be able to make the first session, but that's okay. We have quorum like we agreed on, because the 3 other players in the GM can still make it, so we're still gonna have a game. We'll figure out what Tabitha's PC is doing. So yeah, easy peasy, session 0. Not difficult to do, really just gonna set a stage for an enjoyable, collaborative game address any concerns or potential issues before they arise during play. So anyway, if you like this video, consider subscribing. If you don't like notifications and subscriptions, I have a backlog of stuff. I try to put out stuff weekly. Took a bit of a break for real life stuff, but I hope to be back to it now. I also have an audio only podcast format if that's better for folks. Like if the YouTube app on your phone is not great, or you don't want to buy used Red, which is totally fine. Links to all that in the description. Anyway, thank you for hanging out and come see me again soon. Bye.